right, want to welcome everyone to Audio Knuckle Busters, also known as AKB. Today, our topic is going to be younger generations coming up in the studio world, in the studio business, home studio ownership as well. With us today, we've got Robert Bogart, which, in a roundabout way, Robert kind of falls within that category. Robert, how old are you?
I am 28, born in 1989, so that puts me right there in that millennial gap right there.
Okay, so talking about millennials, what are some of the other generations, X, Y, Z? Explain some of that to us, because I'm a kind of an older guy. Sterling probably doesn't necessarily care about that all that much as well, but we're having to deal with younger generations.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it, I remember growing up in the 90s, I heard Generation X a lot.
What is the biggest defining generational gap between guys like me and Tim that learned how we were taught? We didn't necessarily learn it, but we were taught how to place a microphone. We were taught studio psychology. We were taught studio etiquette. We were taught all the things that they do not teach in the gazillions of schools that are out there now. That's what I see as the biggest gap. And so I think that's a lot of what I would like to talk about. I don't know about you guys, but or just the differences between us.
Okay, I'm a millennial. Y'all are, what generation are y'all? Do y'all have a label?
I'm actually considered a baby boomer.
Yeah, and
Baby boomer.
I'm on the tail end of, my mother is a baby boomer. So I'm the generation right after Tim, like close second right behind the boomers.
Okay.
Child of the 70s, very early 70s.
Okay. All right, so we're very clearly different generations here. I'm a millennial, and y'all would say y'all are baby boomers.
Ish.
Yes.
So we'll be talking about
I'm
the
an
difference.
ish, yeah.
Ish.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the differences between y'all's experience and my experience.
The audio industry then, now.
Okay, so from the stories I've heard, I feel like there's a lot more kind of hands-on, a lot more opportunities to get a lot more jobs available for people to get in to the studio and be underneath some people and learn it, get hands-on. And I'm thinking since the studio, recording industry kind of took a dive in the 90s, that the jobs started going away and some of that knowledge maybe stopped being passed along like it was in the past. And now, excuse me, I think we're relying a lot on the internet, YouTube videos and stuff like that to get our information. And some things probably don't get mentioned because a lot of those people on the YouTube videos are fellow millennials trying to teach other people,
Is it fair to say that the stuff that you guys are finding out on the internet, and I'm coming at this once again as an older generation. I did grow up with computers, so to speak. As a matter of fact, every piece of software that was used back when I was doing pop music and stuff like that relied on a computer. And this is actually towards the end of the 80s, coming into the 90s. I guess where I'm going with all of it is that you feel like the information that is being handed out to you guys on the internet, whether it's YouTube, an information source, is that coming from older generations putting that out there, or is that others who have gotten some experience and are quickly putting that out there?
Well, I think it's just a mixture of everything. I've seen, some old guy, and I don't want to say old guy, but
That's fine.
Go ahead.
a guy in his 50s, old metalhead, and he's putting out some hilarious videos, and I've seen people making fun of him. And then you got people who say, "Oh, this is the best guy to," So you've run into these opinions on the internet about which is good and which is not. Mm-hmm. But really, I've caught myself, following a forum post like, "Oh, this is how you're supposed to set your compressor." So like, I'll just blindly do that for a month without really listening. All in all, it takes knowledge and experience to know what information is actually correct out there. So it's easy to get misled because there's just so many videos.
I would say that's a pretty fair analogy of what the internet, the havoc that it's wreaking on what is now an art form that's basically going away very fast.
Yes. Well, a couple of things. I don't know what to trust anymore on the internet. I've been burned several times.
Yeah.
We hear all the scandals that take place, information getting, so on and so forth. Diving into that. So I'll say it like this. A lot of times, now I have learned things off of, say, YouTube. For example, if we have a piece of equipment that is fairly new and I have limited knowledge, I'm going to bring up, Behringer's X32 when that desk first came out. There were a few things that I didn't want to sit there and monkey punch around on. And the quickest thing that I could do was go to YouTube and see who had some stuff out there already. And it was very helpful. But along the way, you're kind of going, all right, there's lots of ums and ahs and hang on just a second as stuff is going on. It's like, man, I just need to get to the meat and potatoes of this thing and just figure out what needs to be hooked up, what configuration do I need to go into. And so there's all this extra stuff. I think it's fair to say with Sterling and myself, both of us, we actually had our mentors, whether we agreed or not sometimes. And this is yet another whole path that we could go down. But I made choices on things that I wanted to embellish upon when I was learning from my mentors. In other words, I was cherry picking the information that I deemed really likable by me, stuff that worked for me. And I don't know that I necessarily had the immediate access to something. In other words, I could watch somebody and go, I like what they're doing there. And I could ask them, hey, what were you doing? And they would show me. But there's also the old school way of thinking back in the day, which was if we're spending time, money, energy, and effort on teaching you how to do this, this is our information, and you're not going to share it with anyone.
Right. There was a lot of secrecy.
Yes.
There was a lot of job security and a lot of people going, I'm only going to show you one thing.
Yes.
You know, the very most basic thing. And it's not, first of all, when I started out, the internet was still non-existent. It wasn't even a thing. And so there was no YouTube. There was no tutorials. You had to figure it out on your own or ask your mentor. And if your mentor was willing to give you that information, then you took that ball and ran with it. And whether you passed that information on or not was up to you. The books were ridiculous. The manuals for most of the gear is, for lack of a better word, stupid. Because a lot of companies would start out writing, they were written in Japanese. Then they were translated to French and then to English. So
true.
Manuals did not make sense.
Right.
It was horrible. It was like a no-win situation out there. And so, you know, there was a lot of stuff we had to figure out on our own.
So y'all heavily relied on each other's experience.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And others. I mean, I remember distinctly, this was on UGK's record, where Tim Latham came down from New York City.
Yep.
This all started off, and I'll keep it short, but this all started off where the record label did not think that Sterling and I were, shall we say, I don't know, qualified as record engineers.
Because, you know, label people have got that all figured out.
Oh, yeah.
And we had fun with that. Even the guys in UGK, they were having lots of fun with the guy that was sent down from the label. Long story short is that we get introduced, and it was really a really cool thing.
Yeah.
The label sends a guy by the name of Tim down there. I'm going, well, this is kind of cool. We didn't know anything about Tim when he arrived down there. We kind of knew that he was probably a badass, and he was going to oversee what we were doing. He gets down there, and he goes, man, you guys have totally got this under control. You mind if I hang out with you for a few days? Glad he did. And here's the reason why, is we had a sync box, the old Roland SBX80, between Tim, his knowledge, the little bit that I knew, the little bit that Sterling knew, we were able to help UGK acquire the information that they needed to send another person on their merry way, who was basically holding their information ransom. In other words, this guy was on the clock. He's being paid handsomely for hanging out.
So it's the equivalent of somebody who has a laptop with all the sessions on it, and he's got it, locked down. He's like saying, "You can't get this without me."
Yep.
Pretty much. And so, all of that to say that was not done on the internet.
Nope.
And I'm not even for sure how we would have asked those questions. How do you do this? Because this was some really out there shit. It really was, especially for the time. We were
Right.
rolling on analog tape, first of all.
Right.
There is...
And
which is
digital, right?
And digital.
We were doing both. We were locking up 2 machines.
We were, but even at that, it's still a tape machine.
Right.
Syncing stuff together has a lot to do with beat clock, and it has a lot to do with time code and FSK, having these machines talk to one another, and all of this stuff. Here's where I'm going with it. That would have been really nice to have it on the internet, but it didn't exist.
Right.
And so we get to meet like this super, super engineer out of New York. He's the coolest of cool, hanging out.
Look him up, kids.
And-
he is literally a badass.
Yeah, without question. So back onto the millennial versus old school, so on and so forth. Robert, you were picked out of a class of several people by me to. We kind of kidded around about this in episode 2. Why would anyone want to do that?
Right.
One of the most frustrating things for me is this information, because I'm teaching now, and I told my class at the very, very beginning, and you've always got those who are looking at their phones or looking at a computer screen. You don't know whether they're paying attention or not. And I told my class right up front, I can bring you to it, and here's the information. I can lay it out there for you. But when it comes to you accepting that and receiving that, that's on you. And here we are, last week of school.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got guys their pants right now because they are like, I don't know what happened. They're missing files. I don't know where I got asked this morning, where's all my stuff? And I don't know. Where did you leave it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
You think that's a millennial problem? People not taking responsibility, asking.
I do.
Well, and I don't want to generalize here. I don't want
We
to
obviously
paint a wide
can't-
swath.
I know plenty of people who are like, don't fit that description at all. My age, people who work really hard, responsible, blah blah blah. But we do make generalizations about
We do.
these groups.
And
Sure.
that's
Sure,
very
it's
right.
human nature.
And I think you got it right, Sterling. It shouldn't be a broad swath.
I want to learn more about the younger generation so that I can relate to them and they can relate to me.
Exactly.
Because that's a lot of my clientele now are quote unquote millennials, and I want to be able to communicate with them, but I don't want to sound like I'm preaching. I don't want to sound like the old man in the room. Back in my day, we didn't have an internet.
I think it's going to happen, though. Either way, this is just my take on it. I'm 57 years old. I've gone through those. My wife always says, you're so emotional about everything, and you wear your feelings out on your shirt sleeve and all these things. But because I felt this way, too, I think, when I was 19, 20 years old.
Sure.
It's like, man, I don't know that I'm going to accept what this guy's telling me because he's old. And that was a bad decision on my part back then.
Sure.
Had I been smarter, I would have gone, once again, cherry pick the information. Just because guys were mentors of ours didn't always make them great engineers.
Oh, no.
either.
And older doesn't even necessarily mean wiser by any stretch. But when somebody's on to something. When somebody's smart. When somebody's got the experience to back up what it is they're pushing.
So I owe the millennials an apology for the broad brushstroke of that, because you are correct. I still have the percentages are up. Percentages are up from what they were 4 or 5 years ago of people who they show up, they've got the answers that they need,
Yeah.
and they're doing the work.
If I had to say the biggest difference between millennials versus past generations, I mean, it has everything to do with the advent of technology. I think that's it, because like you've said it yourself, comparing yourself now to when you were in the 80s, when you only had a landline. Now you got your cell phone, all that. You got people can communicate to you instantly whenever they want.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, that kind of changes something in the psyche. Like that
Sure.
ADD and all that
Sure.
stuff, So I'd have to say that the millennials are so, and I guess younger generations growing up with technology, and there's just like these theories, or there's a study about how, we're offloading information onto the phones. Like I don't remember phone numbers anymore. I used to memorize all the addresses and numbers. Now I don't have to. I can put it on our phone. So there's definitely an element, a connection there between, how millennials go about their day-to-day lives with technology. And I think in the audio world, maybe they're a little aloof or whatever, but they come in with their answers because it's just quick. Just go on Wikipedia, whatever, pull it up real quick. You got it. You're good.
Right. I can agree with that. I'm not even the same person I was in my 20s.
No.
None of us are. You're still in your 20s, and in a couple of decades, you're going to turn around and look back and go, wow, I'm not even the same person I was when I did the podcast.
Right.
That all being said, I think we grow. I think we mature. We change. We all end up, because if I had to go back to the way that we used to do things, I would probably go on a 3-state killing spree.
Maybe.
Because it was crazy, some of the stuff we have to do, whereas now all we got to do is click a button and it gets sent to the other side of the globe instantly. I love that. I think it's great. I embrace the new technologies. I think where I'm kind of wanting to hear the conversation go is where's this going to put us in 10 years, 15 years? Because not that I'm losing sleep over it, but I am concerned that things that are on the internet are mainly technical things. They are strictly here's how you do this, here's how you get from point A to point B. It's very informative. I'm learning a lot. I have a couple of groups and forums that I'm part of that I absolutely love. And I'm sitting here going, wow, how did they figure that out? And it blows my mind. But I have yet to ever, even the old guys that have their own YouTube channels, and I'm talking guys older than you and me, they're not, that as far as I know or have never seen, they're not teaching anything about studio etiquette or the psychology of recording with someone, the psychology of working with a client, just things like that. I don't see it. I don't hear anything about it. And I think those things might be neglected. There's no light shining on that stuff about how to relate to your clients. There's not a whole lot of it anyways that I've seen. Very, very, very few things.
Yeah, I've just had to learn as I go. Nobody ever told me, how to handle yourself, when to hold your tongue, or, maybe like when somebody's at the mic thinking about something, you don't want to talk to them or interrupt or something like that. There's just all these little
Right. Where is this information going to come from?
Experience.
Because I had guys like Tim show me, literally show me, hey, zip it.
Yeah.
Or, hey, maybe step out of the room for a couple of minutes, or learn to read the room, those kinds of things. And you can't do that on YouTube.
No, and you can't really teach it in class. I mean,
Right.
we used to attempt to do that at Media Tech, where, even posture, having a professional look about you.
Right.
And it might not have anything to do with how you're dressed per se, but that might have something to do with it too. But, it's one thing when you, as a client, and you walk in and you see someone who is attentive and sitting up proper and ready to go.
Right.
That's very different from walking into a friend's, home studio with the feet propped up on the this or that. I was corrected once. This was over at Josh Robinson's place by Matthew Wright, who was the studio assistant there. Matthew knew very, very little about audio, but one of the things that he did very, very well was he took care of that studio, including correcting guys like me when he would walk in. It's like, why are your feet up on the desk? And it's like, you know better. And he was right in saying that.
Well, there you go.
So it is.
And-
It's those things, and it's very hard to teach.
Is that all gonna go away now that the studio is going away? That's another concern. The studio is going away. It's almost gone.
I don't think it's going to. It's just changing. I think we're in a just a period of change where we are going away from those big studios, but people are going to have to learn, because what's not changing is the relationship between the artist and the engineer or producer. You're always going to have that same etiquette, the same,
Right.
you know.
It definitely is relational. I wonder across the globe, most certainly Europe. We say that the large studios are going away, which here in America
Yes.
they definitely are. But I wonder if that is true globally.
I'm gonna say no, because I talked to Andy LaRock of King Diamond fame, and he has his own studio in Sweden called Sonic Train Studios, and I asked him that very question, and this was about a year and a half, 2 years ago at the House of Blues when there was a King Diamond show happening. And I was asking him about that because it was really bad here a couple of years ago. It's picked back up a little bit, but back then when I asked him that question, he said, it's not really that bad in Europe. We stay booked, we stay busy. People know that if they want a good quality recording, they're going to have to hire a professional. They're going to have to go to a real studio with real professional recording engineers. And I think we've made it over that hump that you guys are experiencing now fairly quickly and fairly painlessly.
Yeah.
Those weren't his exact words. I'm paraphrasing here, but that's what he told me, and that was 2 years ago.
That's interesting.
I don't think it's a global issue at all.
So where did those engineers come from? Are they schooled?
That again, I don't know the answer to that question, but there's some real badasses that are in Europe, and we both know that.
So why is it that everybody there can appreciate the quality and go for it, whereas I guess I'm assuming the situation here is that most people think they can just do it in their bedroom now?
Because
marketing,
I think
advertising,
that is very much an American attitude.
Yeah.
Because if you think about,
It's the
driving all the billboards on the highway in America and all the advertising, and then you have all these people saying, you can do it in your house, look at these plugins, you can do this, you can be a star in your bedroom.
Very much so think that. I very much think that is an American attitude, and not for the better. I think it's come from this place of this post-World War II bullshit attitude that Americans have, and have as the few generations that have come after World War II, they've just gotten lazy and complacent and entitled. I really think it's a byproduct of that.
I think taking things for granted as well.
Absolutely.
It's really where it hits for me, because I don't think about it. It's like I don't have to, when I was born, things were pretty good. It's like I have to go through World War II or Cold War or whatever.
or depression or
Right.
Exactly.
And I guess, they've had, we've been in war technically a long time with, stuff, but it's not, I don't think, the same as World War II, because World War II is all about let's get together as a country. All the women got in the factories, started. It was like
No more
effort.
Rosie the Riveter in this situation.
I don't feel any sort of strong.
Rosie the Riveter got outsourced.
Yeah,
I
I don't feel that strong community effort here right now.
No.
And I agree. I think even talking about iPads, iPods, everything is It's about the me and the now.
Isolation.
Yeah.
And that's no one's fault other than people wanting to isolate, if you will. Having independent
You're free to make that choice, right?
phone, so on and so forth.
Sure. Too much freedom can be a bad thing, I think.
Sure.
In a sense, it's like I've got too many choices now. How about you take some away from me?
Yeah. I think we try to keep each other in check. So if somebody is just got so much freedom, they don't need anybody's opinion or whatever.
Right.
Right.
Well, I do agree with you on the fact that I do think it's going to come full circle, but I also think that it's silly that has to happen, because that's basically history being cyclical and repeating itself.
So why did it? So it seems like in Sweden it made that transition, or maybe never had a transition.
Probably never had to.
When the internet came along, they never went down, and then transition came back. They just kind of
Right. I see that as a trend.
I'm going to bring up another place, which is Air Studios over in London. So when you walk into Lyndhurst Hall, and Ed Wallace brought this up to me kind of as a joke, but he goes, "Man, you were born in the wrong place." I go, "What do you mean, Ed?" He goes, "This guy over here is, if you want to talk monetarily, this guy's drawing about $3,000 a day for his time. He's at the top of his game." And I talked to him. Schooling is a huge part before these guys are allowed to get behind these, multi-million-dollar consoles. I believe he told me 6 years. It was mandatory for them to be put into a professional environment at that level. So
After 6 years over here, you get to be a doctor.
almost, yeah.
Almost. You get to go have people's lives in your hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big difference between 6 years and a year for
6
those
months.
who go to school.
Yeah. 6 months now. I want to run the whole studio.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
So who's making that? Who's making that decision? Like, is it the government saying, "Hey, we want this quality of"?
I think it's well, first of all, they've been around a lot longer than we have. I mean, Air Studios at one point was owned by George Martin.
Sir
Sir George Martin, yeah. I had it explained to me that 90% of all film scores go through that facility at some point or another. So, obviously I'm real inquisitive about all this stuff. They don't do things the way that we do them here, not necessarily. My example of that is going to be they don't layer, in this case here it was strings. So if you want a big orchestra, you hire a big orchestra.
Right.
If you want a smaller chamber orchestra, that's what you hire. So what I'm saying is, like over here, we Americans, it's like, yeah, I'll just layer the crap out of
Well,
that
fast
thing.
food the hell out of it.
Yeah. We're just going to layer it up.
Deep fry it.
And I'm not
Exactly.
I'm not opposed to that.
Deep fried butter at the carnival.
I mean, it tastes good. You can't deny that.
And I also understand that we're talking about a couple of different things here.
I think it's a culture thing because it's an appreciation for the art. And maybe it's just a strong-armed union or an appreciation for the art. Or
I don't know
something.
that it's necessarily a union, but hopefully it is a strong arm towards the art. Because at the end of the day, I still think that engineering, just the psychology that goes behind it, not to mention the technicalities that go behind it. There's a lot of psychology that's there that you can't teach in school. It's got to be experience and going through some of that stuff.
Yep.
Pro Tools is an example of something that you could just learn off a YouTube video because that's just pure technical teaching you how to work a tool versus
the abstracts.
The abstracts, yeah. So it's like you don't want to pay $40,000 for something that's just something you can go on YouTube and find all the information versus abstract experience stuff that you can't get off the internet.
The schools don't teach the intangibles and the abstracts, and it seems kind of useless to me.
Well, it's almost like audio. If you can't see it, smell it, touch it, taste it, the only thing that's left is to hear it.
Exactly.
And how do you do that? Well, we all know that there's different levels of listening as well.
Right. You listen. Yeah.
How do we go about coming together as, I'm going to call it the older generation, and I'm by far not the oldest generation in audio still. I mean,
there's people 10 years older than you, 15 years older than you, 20 years older than you.
You would think that they would be retired by now, but once again, I don't consider this a job per se. This is not work. This is an art form that I've dedicated my whole adult life to. And this is also one of those things that I tell the up-and-coming. I never call them students. I call them the next generation of engineers and producers coming through. I need to build them up to absolutely believe in themselves to do that.
That's smart. That's smart and way cool way to do that,
Well, I don't know that it's the best way to do it, but
maybe not.
Here's what I can tell you.
Me.
There sure is a lot of doubt when it comes, just like here we are today. Oh, buttholes are clenching and just, oh my God.
What am I going to do?
The one of the ways that I knew that this gig was right for me, that I really wanted to do this with my life, was that I was scared to death the first time I walked into a studio. Absolutely
Ooh, man.
scared.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is great. It was a rush.
It's a total rush. Yeah, it's like riding a ride at Six
Exactly.
Flags,
Exactly. So, and I still get that every now and then. Yeah, I'm jaded, but I've done a lot of stuff, and I still get that rush.
My hopes for the younger generations coming up will put to the wayside that older generations may be old and crotchety to them at the moment.
Yeah.
But if they will pay attention, they'll be able to do like I was able to do, which I call cherry picking through the BS, what you like, what you don't like, so on and so forth, and use that to your advantage.
I tell, not to interrupt, but I do tell everybody that asks me questions, up and comers, whoever the next generation is, they're always asking me questions, and the biggest thing I tell them to do is listen. Please listen, because you're going to run across that one dude that's just full of wisdom, and you're going to latch onto him, and you'll just keep your mouth shut, listen, pay attention, watch how he does things, absorb it, and just have fun. If you're not having fun, you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
And
I believe that first and foremost.
And how we pull together is we just do it. I think we have to. I think it's our job. It's our responsibility that falls on our shoulders to tell them. Sometimes whether they want to hear it or not.
Sure.
They didn't teach you this in school, but here's maybe how I would handle this, or it's the passing of the torch, and it's going to get done whether that environment is available or not. And I'd rather it be done by somebody with a lot of experience.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I had to. I mean, I remember the very first time I was thrown into the fire orchestrally. He was a very good friend. He was always the engineer on sessions that we had done in the past. And it was a morning session starting off, and it was a full-blown orchestra. I believe we had like 60 players in there for this one. We're talking strings, horns, woodwinds, percussion, you name it, it's there. I remember him showing up, and I asked him, "Where do you want me to place the violins and the woodwinds and the this, and what microphones do you want to use on this?" And after about 3 or 4 times me coming back to him, he goes, "I don't know. You need to place them where you want them because you're doing the session. You're engineering this." So it scared the crap out of me. But man, by far, I still remember it to this day. It felt so good at the end of the day.
Yep.
Because it was like, he was very complimentary. I felt pretty good about it, and it was one of those things. Okay, this is a turning point.
Yes.
This is
Very
definitely
much.
a turning point. And then the rest, became history after that, working with guys like J. Daniel Smith.
And if you think for one hot second that he didn't know that, you're fooling yourself.
Oh, no.
He absolutely knew that.
Oh, he did.
This is a turning point for this young man.
And I mean, this gentleman is still around. His name is Bob Singleton. Bob Singleton. And I owe him a whole lot because super nice guy, super on top of it musically and otherwise, engineering-wise, the whole bit. And it just so happened on this particular day, he goes, "I'm producing this. I wrote all this material. You need to engineer it. So you put them where you want them and put the microphones on there that you deem necessary to do that."
Because at the end of the day, I was sitting here trying to work on our little theme song the other day. It's hard to play and engineer at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
It'll drive you nuts.
So I've got students, and Robert, you probably remember this
You're
as
a
well.
musician, you know this.
I go back to class. One of the things I always told my students, don't try to produce it, engineer it, be the actor, be the ADR person, be the guy who's doing all of this stuff, because it will kill you in the long run.
It'll kill you creatively.
Yeah. You got to do it starting out sometimes, there's, only you around to do it
Sure.
starting out.
To learn.
Yeah.
For strictly a learning tool.
But it stresses you out pretty quick, trying to do wear all the hats sort of thing.
Oh, it totally does. And even to the point of one of the big things for me is self-doubt.
Oh, yeah.
When I'm trying to do all of it,
it is a killer.
Stop you in your tracks.
It will surely slow down the process.
Yep.
Slow down the session.
The fear of making a mistake.
Yeah. One of the things that I'm starting to see with my students now is that it is very hard to maintain subject matter for a lengthy period of time. And what I mean by that is that in 5.1, especially when you have broken down all of the audio from a 90-second piece of film, you're having to recreate it, right? Robert, you've done it, right? Did you turn your project in, by the way?
No, I didn't.
You owe me a project.
How long ago was this?
That's
5 years ago.
4 5 years ago.
You owe me a project.
I did the math, and I figured I could still get an A if I didn't do it.
There you go. There's no statute of limitations on that.
Did you
one.
get an A?
I did.
Wow. I wonder how that happened.
Everything else, because I got good grades and everything else.
Did you get that check in the mail?
No, but here's my point: is that I've started noticing, for example, going through and doing fades. One of the big things in post production, especially in this class, is did you get all your fades and or crossfades? Did you get them? Because we all know, especially in Pro Tools, if you've got a piece of audio that just cuts off, there is a possibility of a pop, click, tick, something of that nature.
Yep.
So what I started noticing with these students is that they'll get derailed somewhere about, within 90 seconds, right? They'll get derailed from going through and systematically going and making for sure that tracks are all faded or cross-faded into something else. So it's like, squirrel. And so they'll take off into another direction.
Changing the color of their tracks.
Yes.
Something no one ever hears.
So here's my point. And I honestly, I didn't come up with this. I think whoever did was stupidly brilliant. We come up with a format. You had it in class as well with the 10 different columns, right?
Oh, yeah.
And there's 5 things within those columns. And I lay this out there for the students to follow. Here's your guideline, guys. If you will follow this to a T, you're guaranteed to do very, very well on this. And it is amazing to me. It's like, did you get all the fades in here? And it's like, you can go through and you can tell where the attention just
Missed
went
it.
somewhere else.
Yeah.
Well, it's you're handing them the recipe for bread, and you go, all right, get to work, and you come back, and some of them nailed it, some of them gave you a hockey puck,
Yeah.
some of them gave you a cracker. They didn't follow the recipe. Something happened.
The biggest thing about all of that was a lot of them go, man, this was tough, because it's like you really have to bear down and you have to focus.
Yep.
And I went, hey, it happens to all of us. I've gotten worse definitely over the last 5 years, where I'll be focused on one thing and I literally have to go, stop this thought process. Stop what you're doing and stay focused on what you started here.
Right.
I'm not very good at multitasking. I'd like to think I am, but I'm not.
Neither am I.
I don't think multitasking has actually been proven
A thing.
to be efficient or actually help.
It's not.
It actually
It's not.
makes things worse.
Very
No,
chaotic.
It's horrible. It makes you stray away from the one thing, whatever it is you're supposed to be focused on, and it makes the quality of that one thing suffer.
Yeah.
And when you make the quality of that one thing suffer, you're also making the quality of all the other things you're doing shorthandedly suffer. And so you get this big ball of shit, and you go, well, here's your turd.
Yeah.
No, I don't apply to that at all.
Well, that's almost how I felt about when I handed you guys the audio this week.
No.
It's like, oh my God, but I don't know if you guys got to see the little snapshot that I
Oh,
took.
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
we
Oh,
saw
that's-
it. But, dude,
Terrible.
And it's
That's-
like, but I've once
seen
again,
worse.
I find it really hard to let go. That's another great example of ADD, adult onset ADD. I'm supposed to be focusing on this, and then I hear something. It's like my attention goes to that. Now I'm not doing crossfades. I'm taking noises out, and it's
Right.
like, okay, so as a teacher, I'm having to really calm these guys down, because it's like they're literally going in 9 different directions, because it's like, oh crap moment. I've got to get this in. Hey, when's the last moment that I can get this into you? Well, 11 o'clock tonight. That's it.
And the beauty thing about this is that they're learning several things at once.
They are.
They're learning, this is called a deadline,
It is.
Yep.
Wait till you got a major label barking down your neck, which that's another thing that's going to be a thing of the past here before too long. But still, deadlines.
Yep. My perspective on the whole thing is that if I didn't have anybody like y'all as a resource, we'd have to be reinventing the wheel probably like every year. You know what I mean?
Just because there's no, you're learning by mistake. You're
Yeah,
learning by.
I mean, that's the whole point
Got
of sharing your wisdom or trying to pass down what you've learned is to kind of prevent that just keep
Exactly.
happening and happening and happening, history
Exactly.
repeating itself, sort of thing. So, I mean, that's really the most important thing, and that's why it's always been that there's that mentorship thing that's been going on for thousands of years. That's how they used to do it.
Here's fire. Now go catch something on fire.
It's like going to be a blacksmith. You're 12 years old. You go to a blacksmith and you hang out with him, and one day you learn how to be a blacksmith.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And the internet maybe could help or hurt that.
I think it can always help. I'm positive about that. And there's lots of porn on it, so win-win.
Woo.
Yeah, another distraction. Doing crossfades. Oh wait, no. Oh.
That took a left-hand turn. I
Bad,
wasn't expecting.
bad joke, poor taste. But
Yeah.
but anywho,
You gotta be careful about
Yeah.
what's out there on the internet.
You got to. It's just like a busy street.
It lies to you a lot.
Look both ways. Yeah, it's a liar.
Lies to you a lot.
So
That's where millennials can help the old generation.
There you go.
With navigating the internet.
And that's what I'm hoping
Right.
that you can do with me, as you're our computer guru, audio kind of guy. You help me, I'll help you
Yeah.
along the way, kind of thing.
That's kind of how it works.
I'm always down for some mentoring.
Yeah.
So if I were to ask you, how could we lessen the gap? How would you go about it?
I think it's just talking and communicating, because the more you talk to somebody, the more you realize it's like, oh, there really isn't that much of a gap there.
Okay.
I'd like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Communication's always key.
Listening.
Talk to my wife.
You brought
That's
it up earlier.
that's all she wants out of me. Communication.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah. And I guess as guys, get distracted in audio, it's easy to neglect communication with
It is.
Uh,
the family.
It is.
That's a conversation for balance between work and family.
Oh, that's going to come up too. That's a huge podcast right there, or series
Oh yeah.
of, because good Lord.
That's
this business has chewed up and spit out more families and couples than you can even imagine.
Just entertainment in general.
Yes.
has been.
Dude, that's a searing subject, along with some of the other stuff that we're going to talk about with Jen coming up. But
Yeah.
it needs to be talked about, and I want to be a source of information for people that may not have anyone to talk to.
Yeah.
When we get this content out there, when it becomes readily available, I don't want this conversation to be the end of that. I love talking to people about what I do. I love talking to them about, well, here's how I handled that situation when that happened to me. May be right for you, may not, but here's how I did it.
It should always be about communication. That's the one thing that I'm hoping that I can do with the younger generations coming in. I'm finding it difficult sometimes because I don't see my ways as being old ways, but I'm thinking that the younger generations are beginning to kind of see it that way.
Well, you got to adapt it. It's kind of like carry your passion with you, carry your knowledge and your wisdom with you, and then you can apply it to the new thing.
True.
And if that makes any sense.
I think it's fair.
Totally.
And
Totally.
here's the cool thing that I think is really cool is that I learn from the younger generations. I've learned tons from you.
Dude.
I've learned tons from you. I've learned tons from Sterling. Doesn't have quite the gap that you do.
Right.
But we do. We learn from one another. And
This group that on the interwebs that I'm part of, I've learned so much from them, and they're all in their 20s. They're all 20-somethings, and they're amazing.
Mm-hmm.
They sit there with Pro Tools and figure this crap out, and I'm like, how did you figure that out?
Mm-hmm.
And they sat there and did it. That's how.
Yeah, that's the one thing that millennials got, I guess, on the older generations in the audio industry, is just the ability to navigate the software quickly and kind of figure out all the features and stuff and just be quick with it.
Yeah, I'm not good there.
And I find I'm 28 now, and like I don't have as much energy to go through and see all this stuff and figure it all out. Now I kind of like now I'm like updating Pro Tools, and I'm getting surprised. Oh, there's a new feature. I didn't know they added that. Sort of thing.
Sure.
All right.
Once again, that's why I keep you around, is to keep me updated with that stuff. Once again, shortcuts. Here we go back to Pro Tools. they only won the game because that they were the first kids on the block and they capitalized on that. For me, it's all about the shortcuts. It has literally saved the day for me. In the sense that, now, once again, older generation, I'm not going to necessarily go out and look for the next band. I'm not necessarily going to go out and look for the next, hit whatever. Got a family. I've got other obligations and responsibilities. That comes first. I got my opportunity as a younger man to get to do that. That's all good and fine. But I will say, for example, Jenny V's. When we first met, I was able to whip out those little shortcuts that were going to help along the way. And once again, we're not talking record production here, but it is a very fair-paying gig to go in and splice and dice and to be able to carry on. This kind of comes into the conversation about how to relate to your voice personality who's in California and actually have them literally eating out of the palm of your hand, which she does very, very well. So here's my point, is that I'm looking forward to the stuff that you learn, that you can show me. I was shown something the other day, and I went, crap, I didn't know that you could do that.
Right.
Pro Tools,
Right.
And it was really kind of cool. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm hoping that as time goes on, that the younger generations won't look at the older generations, and I'm not saying that everyone does, but not look at the older generation as, why is this guy showing up 5 hours before the session is supposed to start? It has everything to do with getting comfortable.
Yep.
It has everything to do with just having your crap together before you start.
Yep.
Anything you want to add to that, Robert?
Yeah. I'm not the 5 hours early yet. I'll show up about maybe an hour early right now, but I'm sure I'll run into some situations which will make me want to
Oh, yeah.
show up a little earlier.
You'll lose some sleep.
Yeah.
I still go back to the Tommy Cassetta days, and
Sure.
this guy's showing up 5 hours before the session starts. Why are you here? When you get older, you will be doing the same thing. Not smug or anything. It's just very matter of the fact. And
He's
damn it,
right.
if he's not right,
He's right.
Yep.
I'm the same way.
he is right.
So that's kind of a thing, a pattern that these old guys and their stories and what they tell you, they end up being right. I hear that
A lot
quite
of times.
often.
A lot of
ended up
times.
being right. Should have listened to them.
I think a lot of it has to do with the delivery of the message that needs to be delivered to, rather than coming across as a crotchety old fart going, hey, you got to do it this way or it's a highway.
Right.
Yeah.
It's more like, hey, this has really worked out well for me.
Right.
I guess like for the millennial to listen to the older generation, it would help if it was, I guess, delivered in a nice way, not all angry and crotchety, but like, hey, youngster over there, how about you do it this way? Might help you out.
Can't
Tim-
guarantee that.
Tim's pretty good about that.
Yeah.
He's
Being
nice.
old and crotchety?
No.
Not being old and
No,
crotchety.
Tim's good about nice way of saying, you know what, do it this way instead of you did that the wrong way, It's like
There's
Fucking
there's
did that
plenty
the
of those guys out there.
barking
just
versus
'cause.
being nice.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
I'll take just the nice delivery over the barking.
I'm not going to bark at you, but I'm certainly not going to, pat you on the head and go,
Oh, yeah.
you did that really well.
You get a gold
Yeah.
medal.
Yeah,
for
gold
participation.
star.
I'm not
Good
going to
job.
do that either.
Hitting home runs today. Good job.
Gold star for participation.
None of that.
No, but I guess I was just thinking that's just y'all are looking back when you were in your 20s and you have these older guys in the field telling you stuff, and here you are 30 years later saying, "Yep, he was right."
They were right for the most part.
They were, and it probably got edited out, but I did most of that out of fear.
Sure. Fear's a good basis for a lot of things.
Sure.
Parenting,
Yeah.
mentoring.
A lot of it was
Sure.
fear. Not all, but some. I brought up J. Daniel Smith as one of the orchestrators that I used to work for. And we worked long and hard, but we got lots of stuff done. And I'm talking full orchestra,
Yeah.
room full. That was not out of fear. That was not fear at all. It was you want to have your A game on because this guy has got his A game on.
Yep. You want to be on the same page.
You want to be there with him because your day will go very, very well if you will stay with him. And he won't be rude, but he will be very. He'll let you know. Hey,
Matter of fact.
I need to move on, and here's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, I like that. I like the idea of showing up early, making for sure that everything is ready to rock and roll when whomever is going to walk in
Yep.
is
agree.
ready to do it. We got lots of other stuff that we can talk about, upcoming things with millennials and other generations that are after our generation. Things like how to take care of clientele. Do you get your money up front when you're doing stuff and things of that nature? I'd like to pick this up at a later date, talking about those kind of things.
Oh, yeah.
Sterling and I have plenty of stuff that we can lend
The
towards
business
this.
of the business.
So, without further ado, if everyone's cool, you got anything else to say there, Robert?
No, I'm just glad we're here communicating, closing the gap,
Closing the gap, yeah.
By all means.
So, with that, without further ado, we're going to say farewell for now. AKB saying bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.